Hi friends, Pastor Jason here. This week in our staff devotionals, we've been talking with you about grit or perseverance. One of the people in my life that strikes me as somebody who had a lot of grit, perseverance, is my great-grandmother. This is my great-grandmother Kibler. She's pictured here in about the 1980s, the mid-1980s. My great-grandmother was born in 1900, and she had a lot of challenges that came along in life. Just living in the 1900s was challenging enough. But in 1927, she became a mom. In 1928, her husband would pass away from appendicitis. In 1928, also, the country was thrown into the Great Depression with the crash of the stock market. She continued to stay on the family farm and farm it by herself and her father-in-law until the mid-1930s. And then she moved to town and she took up nursing. I learned all that she did all that, and she had an 8th grade education. It amazes me what she had and yet what she was able to do. 15 years after she passed away, I learned something else about my great-grandmother, that most of her adult life she only had one good eye. There are so many times I marvel at her life, and many times when I read the Old Testament, I read the stories of like Samuel's mother Hannah, who pleads with God for a son, or I read the stories of Ruth and Naomi, who lost all kinds of people that they loved, and yet they were challenged to stick together, to love one another, to love God, to be a part of what God was up to. I think about how they had grit, and I see the face of my great-grandmother in those stories. Now sometimes the place of grit comes from the reality that we suffer. In fact, Paul speaks to this in the book of Romans, where he talks about how suffering leads to perseverance, and perseverance leads to character, and character leads to hope, and these things don't disappoint us. And yet he goes on and he remarks that all these things don't disappoint us because at the end of the day, there's just not something that we gain on ourselves or we gin up in our own effort. No, but these things happen and they are formed in us because God's love has been poured into our hearts, and there is a sense where grit or perseverance is a gift of the Holy Spirit. I don't know what your week has been like. I hope it's been good. But you know what? We all live in a time where we need to have grit. And grit is a gift that the Holy Spirit can give to us, that we can receive. So this week, I'd encourage you, take some time to sit and listen and ask the Lord for the gift of perseverance, the gift of grit, to carry on with what you've been asked to carry on with, and to see these times through to a place where we rejoice in all that God has given us. Hope to see you tomorrow in worship. Thanks for joining us today. God's best to you. Bye.